As promised, we bring on Andy Staples, national college football host for On3. Andy, thanks so much for the time. How are you today?
Doing great. Now, best Prince song ever. We ready?
Yep.
Place of Your Man. It's incredible.
All right. Paulie nods in agreement. So I think Paulie...
Seven. Like, I like Prince a lot. 7 is my favorite Prince
song. 7 is a great song. That's it. I showed my kids the Prince Super Bowl halftime show in the rain in Miami.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, wait, all the ones we've seen in our lifetimes really suck. And I was like, yeah. There's nothing like that.
Yeah, right. He had a legendary concert at the Dome way back in the day also that people
still talk about.
Yeah, the videos of it are amazing.
Yes. All right, Andy, let's talk some college football with you. And I guess let's start with the news that we saw first reported by On3 that Steve Angeli, Notre Dame's backup quarterback, is in the portal looking to find a new landing spot and apparently is visiting Syracuse to check out what Fran Brown has to offer. We were a little caught off guard by it, given that Fran had recently named LSU transfer Ricky Collins the starter. What do you make of this Steve Angeli situation? And do you think he would go somewhere to be the backup, or if he signs somewhere, he's going there to be the starter? Correct.
Well, I don't know if there's a lot of places where you can sign and go somewhere to be the starter, because we're watching that now. So Joey Aguiar, who was the Appalachian State starter last year, he'd gone to UCLA. He is now without a starting job because Nico Iamaleava is going to UCLA. We're trying to figure out where he goes. Like, there's not a lot of starting jobs open right now. So the other thing with Angeli is it's unclear whether he was going to be the number 2 at Notre Dame or the number 3. There's a guy named Kenny Minchie who people are pretty high on. He's a little bit younger. The thought is C.J. Carr is going to be the starter, but maybe Kenny Minchie was going to be the backup. I don't know. The way I would think it would have handicapped that one is Angeli would have been the backup. So would you be leaving Notre Dame where you would have been the backup? Probably to go start somewhere. My thought was he's good enough to start somewhere, but the question is, are there any jobs anywhere? Maybe Purdue, maybe Minnesota, and like you guys said, Fran not only named Ricky Collins a starter, but he'd made a kind of a show 2 or 3 weeks earlier saying, I'm just going to name a guy. Like, I'm not going to play these games of, will I be able to keep these people? Are they going to leave in the portal? No, I'm just going to name a starter. And he did. Like, he followed through. So, yeah, I'm unsure what that means. But the other thing you could say is, I was a walk-on under Steve Spurrier, and he always said this about quarterbacks. He's like, how come we don't treat it like every other position? Like, the left tackle's job is always up for grabs. What's the difference?
Yeah. It's a good point. Since we're talking quarterbacks and, you bring up, the situation out at UCLA, what do you think is going to happen at Tennessee? Who's next there? Who's next in line?
Well, that's the question, because I think at this point they're not going to shake loose an established starter. You saw that Josh Hoover, the TCU starter, it came out in the Fort Worth Star-Telegram that he turned down. They're reporting $1 million raise from Tennessee. I don't know if that's necessarily true or not, but we did hear even before Nico took off at Tennessee that if he left, that Josh Hoover is one of the people that they might reach out to. So it makes sense that all of this is sort of shaking out the way it did. But Josh Hoover's staying where he is. All these other Big 12 established guys are staying where they are. It doesn't seem like somebody's shaking loose that could come and just be the starter there. It may be a situation where you have to sign somebody to compete with the guys they have, because they have a redshirt freshman named Jake Merklinger, and they have a true freshman named George McIntyre. And you wouldn't want to go into the season with just those two. Like, preferably you'd want to have another player, not necessarily the guy who starts, but somebody who's taken some snaps at the FBS level. And that's why I just wrote a column saying Joey Aguiar, the guy who's leaving UCLA, like, not to be your starter, but to compete, yeah. Why not look at that?
We had Fran Brown on our show last week, that infamous interview now, right, where he talked about the Trevor Pena situation. Go ahead.
I've never heard someone misquoted more. Like, people just did not get that. Like, all you had to do was listen to the 30 seconds before he said that to know he wasn't actually talking about Trevor Pena asking for $2 million.
So along those lines, I'm curious what you thought of. I'm sure you heard the interview. It sounds like you did, and how Fran handled it. And again, he definitely made it clear. He's like, I love the kid, but this is what happened, and then he kind of laid out there in full transparency, kind of his side of how it all went down. And of course, the comments that got picked up were that part of it, not the part where he's saying, I love the kid, I'd do anything for him. But I'm curious to get your thoughts on the transparency, the being brutally honest, the laying it out there that it was, he asked for more money. He was getting well paid. What did you think about that? Because we're not really seeing that around the country from other coaches. Were you fine with that interview, how it was handled by the coach?
Of course.
Yeah.
I love it. I mean, and Fran's been consistent in every interview he's ever done.
Yeah.
Like, Fran's the same guy. He's not putting on airs. He's not trying to be somebody he's not. I love it because you know a lot of these coaches that are kind of car salesmen and they act one way on the air and another way off the air. Fran Brown is the same guy either way. I love it. Now, the part I thought was interesting, and this was when he was talking to you guys about Pena, and he was talking about the actual reasons. Like, one of the things he said before the $2 million comment was he said, hey, he's not a coach. He's a player. I got the sense that he's talking about, hey, this guy maybe is not as sure about this offense now that Kyle McCord's gone, and he's got some suggestions. And perhaps we don't need that from the peanut gallery.
Yeah, I mean, it was, and we love it too, by the way. I mean, it's refreshing to talk to somebody who actually gives you, real answers, and you ask for insight, and they actually give you insight. So, we were, we love talking with him as well. With Trevor Pena, he's not coming back. Where do you see Trevor Pena landing? You think he's going to Penn State? There's some talk about Miami. Are you hearing any other schools that are involved right now? Where do you think he ultimately lands?
When I saw he was going to Penn State on a visit, I was like, that would be just perfect for Penn State because that's what they need. They need somebody at that position that can be a reliable target, that can pick up, consistently catch the ball, pick up yards. And Trevor Pena is not necessarily like a massive break. He's not going to average 23 yards a catch or anything, but he's going to catch a bunch of balls and produce. And that's something that Penn State has not had at the receiver position in a long time. They had a run there where they were producing one or two pretty good receivers a year, but the last 2 years they just haven't had anybody. Like even Keandre Lambert-Smith, who went to Auburn last year, wasn't terribly productive at Penn State. And so they threw 100 passes to Tyler Warren last year at tight end, but that's not how you want to run your offense, ideally, even if you have an elite tight end like they did. So you go to the Orange Bowl, not a single receiver caught a pass against Notre Dame, and yet Penn State has got the ball with 2 minutes to go playing for a chance to play for the national title. So imagine if they had one or two effective receivers. They could compete for national title. So if he winds up there, I think that would be a really good fit. Miami has always been a very aggressive portal spender. They're in a situation where they lost a couple of really, really good receivers. Xavier Restrepo, I don't care what he ran in the 40, going to be good in the NFL. The guy just catches balls. But they've got to replace a lot of production. So it wouldn't surprise me that they are in the mix there. But I think Penn State, if they could make that work, would be phenomenal for both parties.
Andy, what do you make of the ACC as a whole? We saw last year that they were able to get two teams in the college football playoff. There was some concern that they might be a one-bid league, but they did get two in. Do you see the ACC's profile, getting better in coming years, or do you think that gap between where they are and the Big Ten and the SEC, that gap's going to get wider in the coming years?
Well, the gap is going to be between the middle and the lower tier teams. Because the top of the ACC is competitive with the top of the other two leagues, but the middle and lower tier are not even close. They're not going to be close, and that's the issue: is can everybody get on board like the way Mississippi State gets on board, or the way Arkansas gets on board? Like they don't have that
right
at the bottom tier schools in the ACC, and they didn't always have it at the bottom tier schools in the Big Ten, but now they're just so flooded with money. I don't think there's a choice. If you're Purdue or if you're Rutgers, you got all this money, you're going to start spending it. So I think that's the issue. Now, I do have a question for you guys because you're in Syracuse, so you might know these things. Like, what did John Wildhack or the Syracuse president do to piss off the ACC office this year? That is the most brutal schedule they could have given anybody. Like, I know, we're going to make you play 4 teams in the league on the road. Notre Dame thing is the scheduling thing because it's part of the ACC scheduling agreement with Notre Dame. So, like, they're getting as tough of a draw as you could possibly get. And it's not like the SEC where almost all the draws are tough. It's in the ACC, you can get a really easy one. Like, look at North Carolina's schedule this year. Super easy compared to everybody else. But Syracuse just got jobbed.
Well, I think, as you said, I think going into last year, everybody thought Syracuse got handed an easy schedule, and I think they overcompensated.
I guess. Yeah.
Greatly.
Yeah, it doesn't get much tougher than this, right? You've got 4 college football playoff teams from last year, all away from home, beginning with Tennessee and the neutral site, plus the 4 road games that you're talking about later in the year. It's about as tough as it comes. Paulie, you got something?
I did. I wanted to ask one more ACC question. Was last year for FSU an aberration, and do you think they'll be back this year?
Not necessarily back to what they were 2 years ago, but I cannot imagine them being that terrible because I don't think Mike Norvell forgot how to coach. I think last year was just a perfect storm of you had the wrong quarterback. The team did not mesh with the guys coming out of the portal that you thought were going to be your leaders. Everything went bad. I can't imagine them being that bad again. Now, that said, I don't think they jump back to 13-0 from that. But I think they should be fairly competitive in the ACC, and we'll see. I mean, Thomas Castellanos has played – so they hired Gus Malzahn to run the offense, and Gus was basically getting run out at UCF as a head coach. Thomas Castellanos comes from Boston College, obviously, so within the league, had played for Gus at UCF, so knows this offense. They're excited about that. I don't know how excited I am because – obviously, Boston College was moving on from him at the end of last season. So, it's going to be really interesting to see how they do. But I don't think Mike Norvell forgot how to coach. So I do think this is going to be a competitive team that probably has a winning record. But it's not going back to being dominant because, look, Clemson is awesome this year. They were really good offensively last year. Defensively, could have been coached better. They're going to be coached better now that Tom Allen's the DC. Miami's not going anywhere. They're going to stay good. Louisville, I think, is going to be really good. Louisville had the bad draw like Syracuse did schedule-wise. I don't think SMU's going anywhere. I think they're going to stay good. So, and I think as long as Fran's at Syracuse, I think they're going to be tough. I'm excited to see what he does in year 2 because I think people are attributing a lot of success to getting Kyle McCord. Now, you guys know the history of it. Obviously, Fran and Kyle McCord had a relationship going way back. There's a reason all of this stuff happened. But I'm excited to see what he can do with a team that is more fully, his construction and more of his recruits out of high school. I'm very excited because I think Fran is one of the absolute rising stars in the coaching business.
And Paulie, I brought up that NIL summit a couple weeks ago, and Kyle McCord was there, and he actually mentioned, we had heard this, but I hadn't heard him actually say it. It came out of Kyle McCord's mouth that he said he took he could have gotten twice as much to go somewhere else, but he took a discounted rate, for lack of a better term, to come here to Syracuse, given Fran, given his ties with some of the coaches on the program.
Now, how often is it that Kyle's mom worked or Kyle's dad worked with Fran's wife back in the day? How often is that going to have that connection? But you look at some of the other connections, like Fadil Diggs is the guy that Fran obviously recruited out of high school, but Fadil chose Texas A&M. A lot of those Jersey connections from the recruiting, but I am very excited to see Fran build this program in his own image.
Should be interesting given that schedule, Paul.
Yeah, let me ask you that before we let you go. What would be a good year for Fran Brown with this schedule that you were just saying is done?
7-5 would be tremendous. Yeah. And I know that's not going to make anybody happy to hear that, but that schedule is so freaking hard.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I mean, I think people would sign up for 7-5 right now, given how daunting this schedule looks. Andy, thanks so much for the time. Great insight. Keep up the good work, and hopefully we can have you on again down the road.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much, guys.
All right, Andy Staples joining us from On3. With that, we'll open up the phone lines the rest of the way, 315-437-7644. Back after this on ESPN Radio.